I was engaged to my dad's enemy. Everything seemed fine until I saw him walk into another woman's room. Shocked? Heartbroken? Well, that was just the beginning of the chaos in the palace. My father's sworn enemy's son got engaged to me. But that very night, while we were out visiting a pleasure house, I saw him walk into the room of an exotic foreign beauty. Heartbroken, I got completely drunk. In my haze, I acted on impulse and did whatever I pleased. The next day, the news that I had forced myself on the Crown Prince spread all over the capital.
1.
That day, just like always, my father was in the imperial study, arguing heatedly with his old nemesis over political differences. Meanwhile, his enemy's son and I sat off to the side, calmly playing chess, completely used to this scene by now. Suddenly, he said, "No takebacks." My face flushed. While he was drinking tea, I quietly moved the piece I had touched back to where it was, yet I still stubbornly argued. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, picking on a weak woman like me, doesn't that hurt your reputation as a gentleman?" The Crown Prince Li Muyan gave me a cool, casual glance. A weak woman who climbs roofs, tears off tiles, and gets into fights all day long? That look was downright provocative. Everyone in the world said that His Highness the Crown Prince was upright and refined, cold in temperament, perhaps, but always courteous and gracious. Even the famously stern Grand Tutor praised him, without reservation. But in my eyes, he was clearly a petty, vengeful, sharp-tongued, scheming miser who went out of his way to oppose me at every turn. I snapped back. "Did I fight you? Or climb onto your roof and tear off your tiles? Why are you sticking your nose into everything?" Li Muyan replied unhurriedly. "Haven't you caused enough scenes in the palace already, rolling around and throwing tantrums?"
I was so furious my teeth bared.
I slammed the table, making all the chess pieces tremble. "Believe it or not, if I marry into the Eastern Palace, I'll turn the entire place upside down and make sure you never know peace again." Li Muyan froze. His cool, clear eyes stared at me, disbelief flickering through them. I had blurted out that nonsense in the heat of the moment, but seeing him at a loss for once lifted my spirits. I pressed on with my threat. "Today, this princess refuses to back down. Provoke me again, and I'll petition His Majesty for a marriage decree. Then you'll see just how formidable I am." Who would have thought that before Li Muyan could respond, His Majesty, who had somehow stopped arguing, burst into hearty laughter. "Excellent, excellent. That's exactly what I wanted. Someone, draft the decree." "Me." "My father." As if afraid I might regret it, His Majesty had the imperial edict written at lightning speed. Just as I reached out to stop it, the jade imperial seal came down with a decisive thump. The moment the seal pressed down, my legs went weak. I dropped to my knees with a loud plop, prostrating myself flat on the ground. His Majesty glanced at me and smiled kindly. "Danyang, there's no need for such formalities. From now on, we're all family." Then he pointed at my father, gloating openly. "Argue with me again, will you? Go home and wait to be scolded by your wife."
2.
My mother probably could never figure out how I had gone into the palace as usual with my father, just to mooch pastries from the imperial kitchen, and somehow come back with an imperial marriage decree. As His Majesty wished, she gave my father a thorough scolding. So how did the grudge between my father, the Marquis of Dingyuan, and His Majesty begin? That story starts with my mother. When they were young, my father and His Majesty were romantic rivals. Both secretly admired my mother. Unfortunately, my mother was as dense as a block of wood and never noticed. My father struck first, used a few small tricks, and married her. Back then, His Majesty was still the Crown Prince and refused to accept it. Just 1 month after my parents' wedding, he proposed that my father accompany my maternal grandfather on a military campaign to the western frontier to suppress unrest. That trip lasted 3 years. During those 3 years, His Majesty married someone else. In truth, he knew that if my mother hadn't loved my father, she wouldn't have married so easily, but the grudge was already formed. After His Majesty ascended the throne, And my father inherited his noble title a few years later. My father loved gathering a group of remonstrating officials to nitpick His Majesty at every opportunity. His Majesty was no pushover either. After court sessions, he would haul my father straight into the imperial study to argue. After my great-grandmother, Grand Princess Shuahua, passed away, I could no longer eat the delicious pastries she used to make. By chance, I discovered that the imperial chefs could recreate a very similar flavor. From then on, I loved following my father into the palace to freeload meals and bring some back for my mother. Carefully, I carried a plate of osmanthus cakes to her. "Mother, please calm down." She looked at me and sighed softly. "You really did inherit my temperament, didn't you? Tell me, do you truly like His Highness the Crown Prince?" I opened my mouth, hesitated for a long while, and in the end, said nothing in rebuttal. "I like Li Muyan. I have never told anyone. It's a little embarrassing to admit, but the reason is simple. He's just too handsome." I fell for his looks at first sight. My mother sighed again, as expected of my daughter. I gave a dry laugh or two and took the chance, while she was still sighing, to rescue my father. My father was deeply grateful. He stuffed half of his private savings into my hands and said solemnly, "Qinghe, I hope you keep your word. Don't let that emperor's son have a single peaceful day." I counted the banknotes, tucked them into my clothes, stood on tiptoe, and patted my father's shoulder with great seriousness. "Don't worry, father. Once I've taken your money, I'll handle the trouble. Shen Qinghe, will definitely avenge today's humiliation for you." My father was very moved. Then I added, "These 250 taels are just the down payment. Once the job's done, I'll come back for the other half." My father, he chased after me, demanding the money back. I hurriedly called for backup. "Sunan, help me split off 50 taels for him." A black shadow flashed by and blocked my father's path. My father stamped his feet in anger on the spot. By the time I returned to my room, Sunan had followed me back. Happily, I stashed away 200 taels into my little treasury and handed the promised 50 taels to him. Sunan didn't take it. I shoved it into his hands. "Go buy yourself something good to eat. You've been so busy lately you've lost weight." Sunan lowered his gaze and put the money away. "So, princess, you're really marrying the crown prince?" Resting my face in my hands, I stared into space. My mother always scolds my father for indulging me. My father says that since I like something, he lets me do as I please. This time, though things got out of hand, we capsized in a ditch. Sunan asked, "Does the princess not wish to marry?" I paused, then said softly, "I'm afraid he doesn't want it. He's probably cursed me 800 times by now." Sunan stepped closer. "The crown prince doesn't like you?" I said, "Probably not. Li Muyan is always saying that I'm improper for a woman, neither gentle nor graceful, always causing trouble, nothing like a proper young lady. I figure he probably likes quiet, tender women." Sunan replied indifferently, "Then the princess simply shouldn't marry." Rubbing my hands together, I let out a few distinctly villainous chuckles. "No rush. I'll wait for Li Muyan to defy the decree and cancel the engagement himself. His Majesty will be furious and surely punish him severely. Then haha." Sunan smoothly continued. "Then the princess will gain a reputation for being spoiled, overbearing, and abandoned by her fiancé. Me. How about you go out and buy some food right now?" I suggested. Sunan said, "The princess has already eaten quite a lot of pastries. Such binge eating is bad for your health. Also, the princess has gained quite a bit of weight lately and should exercise restraint." I replied weakly, "Shen Sunan, get out."
3.
It was early spring, the weather just beginning to warm. Along the lakeshore, willow trees were lush and green, their slender branches drooping into the water, stirring ripples with each passing breeze. I ran into His Highness the Crown Prince in the outskirts of the capital, a rare sight, since he hardly ever left the palace these days. He was dressed in white, tall and elegant, standing there like a living painting. No exaggeration, I could have hidden behind a tree and watched him all day. If only there hadn't been a delicate, fragile-looking beauty standing beside him. With Lianxiu and Sunan in tow, I crept closer like a thief. To my surprise, the beauty was quietly sobbing, her shoulders shaking as she cried. She looked utterly pitiful. Tisk, tsk, tsk, I couldn't help whispering as I pulled Lianxiu over to gossip. Xiu'er, what a tragedy. Looks like His Majesty's marriage decree really did break up a pair of lovebirds. Break up what? Before Lianxiu could answer, a voice behind me, approaching from afar, cut in. I awkwardly turned back and looked at Li Muyan's handsome yet indifferent face. Your Highness, what a coincidence. You're here to fly kites too? Oh, wait, no. You're here on a date with Miss Zhao? Walking up behind Li Muyan, having just wiped away her tear stains, was none other than Zhao Mingrua, the legitimate granddaughter of Zhao Qian, the current Grand Chancellor. Exactly the type of gentle, quiet woman Li Muyan supposedly liked. Sorry to interrupt. Truly sorry, I said lightly. Li Muyan frowned and rebuked me in a low voice. What nonsense are you spouting? We merely ran into each other by chance. Zhao Mingrua also spoke softly. Princess, please don't misunderstand His Highness and me. I looked at Zhao Mingrua's resentful little glance, tinged with unmistakable provocation, and felt an instant surge of irritation. With a light laugh, I said, this chance encounter must have taken Miss Zhao quite a bit of effort, no? His Highness dismisses it as coincidence so lightly, it's rather hurtful, wouldn't you say? Zhao Mingrua had never liked me to begin with. Hearing this, she was clearly furious and shot back. Princess, you flatter me. My little tricks can hardly compare to the princess's own ingenuity, crying and making a scene in the imperial study to beg His Majesty for a marriage decree. Well, damn. So in everyone's eyes, that engagement decree was something I had begged for. Then again, it made sense. Everyone said the Chancellor's precious granddaughter was breathtakingly talented and peerlessly beautiful, a childhood companion perfectly matched to the Crown Prince. Even Zhao Mingrua herself probably believed she was the obvious choice for Crown Princess. Who would have expected a notorious, ill-tempered princess like me to appear out of nowhere and bind Li Muyan with a single imperial edict? This ill-tempered princess just happened to specialize in dealing with people who refused to accept reality. I wrapped both arms around Li Muyan's arm and deliberately pitched my voice sweet and loud. Oh, Crown Prince brother, are you angry that I got our engagement this way? You haven't even said anything yet, and someone's already rushing to defend you. Miss Zhao, don't get so upset. What if you make yourself ill and no one dotes on you? I only dote on my Crown Prince brother. That move was a classic case of hurting the enemy 1,000 while injuring myself 800. Even I got goosebumps after saying it. Li Muyan stiffened all over and tried to pull his arm away, but I had him pinned tightly. Zhao Mingrua trembled with rage. Her already wet eyes looked ready to spill fat tears again. Her maid immediately rushed forward to support her and said sharply, "My lady is thin-skinned. Of course, she can't compete with someone as shameless and unreasonable as Princess Danyang. But my lady and His Highness grew up together. Their bond is something you can't compare to. We ask that the princess show some self-respect and refrain from such improper touching in public." Oh. So the rumors had been repeated so often that she'd started believing them herself. Just because she had an aunt who was a high-ranking consort and therefore had frequent access to the palace, she now claimed the title of childhood sweetheart? When I was 5, hands on my hips, arguing with Li Muyan, you didn't even know where you were. I was just about to launch into a righteous counterattack when Li Muyan coldly cut in, "How dare you?" I flinched and took 2 steps back, shrinking like a startled quail. The maid fared even worse. Her legs gave out, and she dropped straight to her knees. Normally, no matter how much Li Muyan and I argued, he had never once called me insolent. For a moment, I couldn't even tell who he was addressing. Li Muyan glanced back at me, as if finding the situation faintly amusing. The tight frown on his brow relaxed, and he reached out to pull me closer. "Princess Danyang is my fiancée. You speak ill of her right in front of me. Do you think my temper is truly that good?" I immediately seized the chance to borrow his authority. Do you think his temper is really that good? Li Muyan then turned to Zhao Mingrua. Since she is your maid, it would be improper for me to overstep. I trust you will discipline her properly, lest she disgrace the Zhao family. I eagerly chimed in. Discipline her properly. Don't let her come out and embarrass herself. Li Muyan shot me a pointed look, amusement glinting in his eyes. I pursed my lips and pretended not to notice. Then he continued. As for Miss Zhao's proposal, I find it inappropriate. I hope Miss Zhao will abandon such thoughts as soon as possible and seek another worthy match. My nose practically tilted up into the sky. He doesn't like you, just give it up. Miss Zhao was furious enough to storm off. I said dismissively, what peerlessly talented gentlewoman. All she does is cry, so small-minded. Li Muyan replied coolly. And who could possibly compare to you? You fell off a wall, cracked your head open, nearly ruined your face, and didn't make a sound. Anyone who didn't know better would have thought you were mute. I puffed up proudly.
Exactly.
A heroic woman like me. How could they compare? Behind me, Lianxiu covered her face and whispered, Princess, he wasn't praising you. Sunan, however, looked unconcerned. The princess speaks the truth. I patted Sunan on the shoulder. A true confidant. That's you, Sunan. Li Muyan's gaze flicked to the hand resting on Sunan's shoulder, his expression darkening slightly. I continued to show off.
Well?
Our Sunan is quite handsome, isn't he? Take a guard like this out, and young ladies from other households will be stealing shy glances at him. Lianxiu tugged urgently at my sleeve. Princess, stop talking. I was puzzled. What? I can't praise good looks now. Then all those pretty young male courtesans at Aunt Bai's Bright Moon Pavilion, IMMPH. Lianxiu clamped a hand over my mouth. Li Muyan's expression had turned downright terrifying. Grinding his teeth, he said, Just you wait. I am waiting, I thought. Waiting for you to take the initiative to break off the engagement and get scolded by your father.
4.
After waiting and waiting, I ran into Li Muyan at Bright Moon Pavilion. The look on his face was impressive. So was mine. What are you doing here? I struck first. After all, I was a regular. I'm here to look for someone, Li Muyan said. Rarely did he sound so hesitant, his gaze drifting. Oh, what a coincidence, I replied flatly.
So am I.
Then I won't disturb you. I made a show of leaving. When he reached the room he was supposedly looking for, I hurried to find a good angle. At the moment the door closed, I caught a glimpse inside. A tall beauty dressed in exotic attire, veiled in gauze. My heart shattered with a crack. In the room of Bai Mudan, the owner of Bright Moon Pavilion, I hugged a wine jar and drank by myself. As I drank, my eyes began to sting. Aunt Bai stood to the side, looking mildly disgusted. Drinking yourself into this state over a man. How are you even more useless than your mother? Aunt Bai was my mother's close friend, the daughter of one of my maternal grandfather's comrades-in-arms. Because she was born out of wedlock and never acknowledged, and because her parents passed away early, my mother helped her acquire Bright Moon Pavilion as a means of survival. Everyone in the pavilion, men and women alike, were Qingguan, entertainers who sold talent, not their bodies. Many of them were people with tragic pasts who sought temporary refuge here. I knew nothing would happen in that room. But I was still miserable. Just imagining Li Muyan being attentive and tender toward another woman made my chest feel so tight, I could barely breathe. Aunt Bai asked me, if you like him so much, why do you still hope he'll be the one to break off the engagement? Perhaps seeing me crying with snot and tears everywhere was simply too much for her. Aunt Bai snatched away my wine jar and whispered, the beauty in that room is a man. Stop being sad. I froze. Aunt Bai let out a long sigh, but before she could finish it, my sudden wail cut her off, nearly making her choke. Wah, he likes men, I don't stand a chance at all. Aunt Bai truly couldn't take it anymore. She found a quiet room and dumped me inside to sober up. I was unconvinced and made a ruckus the whole way. So, what if it's men? Bright Moon Pavilion has no shortage of handsome men. Aunt Bai, I want the best-looking man in your building to drink with me and play the zither for me. I can't hang myself on one tree. I have to hang myself on every tree. The heavy slam of the door cut off my ghostly howling. Still, Aunt Bai doted on me. Before long, my door was pushed open by a tall, slender man. I staggered up from the bed, my head spinning. I couldn't make out his face clearly, only that the eyes fixed on me were exceptionally beautiful, like Li Muyan's. I giggled. Aunt Bai really understands me. This Qingguan is exactly my type. Then, like a shameless rake, I lunged at him. He dodged aside. I put on a serious face. I know you sell talent, not your body. Don't worry, this princess won't do anything to you. Just drink with me. As I spoke, my hand closed around his long, well-defined fingers. He paused but didn't shake me off, asking coldly, "Where's the wine?"
Damn it, even his voice sounded the same.
I pointed toward the table, only to realize the wine had already been taken away by Aunt Bai. I wanted to go out and find more, but the aftereffect of the peach blossom wine hit me hard. My feet felt like I was stepping on cotton. I couldn't find my balance. Just as I was about to fall headfirst, the man behind me reacted swiftly, one hand catching my waist, the other gripping my arm, pulling me into his embrace. A clean, crisp scent of wood filled my senses. His chest was broad and warm. "Well then," I declared, "since you delivered yourself to me, don't blame this princess for being rude." While he was still stunned, I kicked him onto the bed. He let out a muffled groan of pain. My apologies, everyone. After that, I completely blacked out.
5.
Alcohol is truly not a good thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been escorted by Li Muyan to stand before His Majesty, so shocked that I couldn't say a single word while Li Muyan, face icy cold, calmly described my crimes from the previous day to his father. His Majesty turned to me and asked, "Danyang, tell me, did this happen?" "I trust you," I replied. "Your Majesty sees clearly." When this subject woke up in the morning, I did not see His Highness the Crown Prince. I was drunk, and many things from last night I do not remember. His Highness is merely taking advantage of that to fabricate accusations out of thin air. "What evidence do you have?" As if he had anticipated this, Li Muyan pulled down the collar on the right side of his robe, pointed to a vivid red mark where teeth marks still hadn't faded, and said, "Right here." Then he gave a self-mocking smile. "Does the princess want to bite me again for comparison, to see whether I've wronged you? What a pitiful sight, like someone who'd been toyed with and then abandoned. If I weren't the person involved, I might have believed him." His Majesty looked at me with an expression that said, "Well, if that's the case, there's nothing I can do," and spoke considerately. "Danyang, you were a bit too impatient. There's still 1 month before your wedding. Could you really not wait? Very well. You know I've always doted on you. Let's move the wedding up to 3 days from now. I've checked. It's an auspicious date." Me. "Your acting is far worse than your son's." When we left the imperial study, I asked Li Muyan darkly, "Are you satisfied now?" Li Muyan replied, "When you're dissatisfied, that's when I'm satisfied." Grinding my teeth, I said, "Just you wait." After spending a night away from home, I returned with yet another imperial decree. My parents' expressions were indescribable. My father hesitated for a long time before finally asking, "I heard you forced yourself on the Crown Prince?" My mother shot my father an annoyed look, then said to me, "Go on. Tell us everything. What was there to tell? That I deliberately mistook Li Muyan for a Qingguan at Bright Moon Pavilion and molested him, only to be framed in return? Or that Li Muyan had met with a strange man and staged the whole thing to force His Majesty to move the wedding date up and shut me up?" The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I crushed the porcelain cup in my hand and swore to my father, "Father, rest assured. Even if I don't want the remaining half of your secret stash, I will still turn the Eastern Palace upside down. I will make sure Li Muyan does not have an easy life." 6. On the night of our wedding, dressed in my lavish red bridal robes, I climbed up onto the roof of the bridal chamber, ostensibly to admire how beautiful the moon was tonight. In the courtyard below stood a group of nannies and maids, all pale with fright. The most senior among them, Nanny Zheng, was urging Lianxiu to persuade me to come down, and had even summoned a few guards, just in case I slipped or fell. Lianxiu was torn. She knew I was acting out of spite, but this was the palace, not the Marquis' residence where I could do whatever I pleased. She said carefully, "Princess, why don't you come down first? If you get hurt, it really won't be worth it. If you're angry, there are plenty of other ways to torment His Highness. Why do this to yourself?" The moment those words left her mouth, the previously whispering crowd fell dead silent. Even Nanny Zheng froze. Me? Xiu'er, you really don't need to force yourself to talk. Only then did Lianxiu realize what she had just said. Her face turned red, and she obediently shut her mouth and stood aside. Li Muyan returned quickly. Dressed in matching bright red wedding robes, his already handsome face looked even more striking under the moonlight. He looked up at me, his brows slightly drawn together, his eyes dark and heavy, thin lips pressed tight. There was a faint flush on his cheeks from the alcohol. He looked on the verge of anger. "Come down," he ordered. "I won't," I said stubbornly, lifting my chin. "Why doesn't your Highness come up here and admire the moon with me?" Li Muyan laughed in exasperation and waved his hand to dismiss everyone. "I'll say it again.
Come down."
"I'll say it again too, I won't. This princess keeps her word. Today I climb roofs and tear off tiles. Tomorrow I'll get into fights. You married me, so forget about ever having peaceful days again. Shen Qinghe." He spoke my name slowly, one word at a time. Just when I thought he was about to lose his temper, he suddenly opened his arms instead. A smile curved his lips, laughter softening his eyes as he said, "Come down. I'll catch you." I went completely blank, staring at him dumbly. The knot of resentment in my chest vanished in an instant, replaced by a frantic little deer crashing around inside me, leaving me dizzy and overheated. I stood up and jumped straight toward him.
Thud.
I crashed into a warm, wine-scented embrace and knocked its owner flat onto the ground. It hurt a little. I complained, "Didn't you say you'd catch me?" Li Muyan sat on the ground and rubbed his temple. "I drank too much at the banquet. Wasn't very steady." Admitting defeat, I stood up, brushed the dust off myself, and headed toward the bedchamber. Behind me, Li Muyan said helplessly, "Qinghe, at least give me a hand." He really had drunk too much. Normally, he always kept people at a distance, cool and untouchable, and he never spoke to me in such a softened tone. His usually clear, cold voice, soaked in wine, sounded deep and dangerously alluring. I turned back and saw him reaching out to me, his hand pale and long-fingered. I grabbed it and pulled him up. Taking advantage of the situation, he leaned his full weight onto me, his fingers brushing my hair. "Why is your hair loose? Where's your phoenix crown?" I slapped his hand away. It was too heavy. I took it off. Li Muyan didn't get angry. He rested his head against my shoulder, his breath spilling warmly across my skin. "Making such a fuss on our wedding night. Are you unhappy that I came back late? Qinghe, were you really in such a hurry to consummate the marriage with your husband? How exactly were you planning to torment me, I could hardly believe the man shamelessly flirting, without changing expression, was Li Muyan. The usually reserved, proper crown prince had turned outrageously bold after drinking. Li Muyan, wake up. I'm warning you. Don't think you can take advantage of me just because you're drunk. I'm not someone you can bully." I pushed him away, turned around, and ran into the bedchamber, reaching for the door. All desire, no courage. That was me in a nutshell. The door didn't close. Li Muyan held it in place. I instinctively retreated, only to be scooped up by him around the waist. He laughed softly. "What are you afraid of?" I argued stiffly. "I'm not afraid." "Then let go of the blanket." "I won't. When you were drunk that day, you weren't like this. And when you're not drunk, you're not like this either." Li Muyan clearly had no patience left to argue. He reached out and pulled away the blanket wrapped around me. I yelped, "Li Muyan, what are you doing? Don't think I won't hit you." Even if you're the crown prince, I won't hold back. Li Muyan leaned down and kissed me.
7. Don't ask.
Just asking will make you regret it. Deeply regret it. I lay in bed, eyes wide open. Li Muyan had already left. I wanted to curse his entire ancestry, but realized that picking anyone would count as a grave offense. Then a sudden thought struck me. His father, the current emperor, was the eldest, so I cheerfully cursed a non-existent uncle. Li Muyan, you. As soon as I spoke, I realized my throat was horribly hoarse. I could only struggle to sit up, dragging my sore, soft body to fetch some water. Pulling aside the curtains, I came face to face with Li Muyan, perfectly dressed and sitting at the table. I promptly dropped the curtains and rolled back onto the bed. Li Muyan poured me water and sat by the bed, watching me drink it all silently. Only then did he speak, carefully measured. Last night, it was my fault. Cool, calm, composed, exactly as always. I blurted out, and there will be a next time? Li Muyan froze for a moment, caught between yes and no.
His ears flushed.
Why did it feel like I was the one who had wronged him? I said, no way, no way. You can't not know what you were like when you were drunk. Li Muyan was silent. After a long while, he admitted, I've never drunk that much before. Me. He continued, at last night's banquet, a few of your father's colleagues who usually move around a lot had conspired to force me to drink, saying they'd make me too drunk to enter the bridal chamber. If you hadn't caused a scene, allowing me to leave early, I might have been carried back at the end. In other words, my father and I had jointly trapped myself. I was furious. I couldn't vent on myself, and my father wasn't around, so I could only take it out on Li Muyan. They forced you to drink and you just drank? You're the crown prince. Who could make you drink against your will? I think you did it on purpose. Li Muyan countered. Why would I do it on purpose? I was left speechless. So frustrating. I threw a tantrum on the bed, rolling around. My clothes, already poorly arranged, became completely disheveled. My arms and shoulders were exposed, the suggestive red marks left by him fully visible. Li Muyan looked at the marks, his Adam's apple moving, then pulled the blanket over me, speaking in a low voice. Stop it. I shot back. I won't. You've bullied me so much and now you won't let me throw a fit? Too much. Covering me with a blanket? You ripped me apart yesterday, then lied saying you'd be gentle, and in my mind, certain inappropriate scenes flashed, whispers, intimate gestures, and I couldn't bring myself to continue speaking. If I am guilty, let heaven punish me, but not by making me bleed from my nose at this very moment. Kill me now. Just do it. Li Muyan pursed his lips, handed me a handkerchief, poured me another cup of water, and finally, unable to hold back, laughed. I grabbed a pillow and hit him with it. Stop laughing. Get out. Li Muyan obediently left after I threw the pillow. Not long after, Lianxiu brought in my washing things. She looked at me, fidgeting. Princess, did you rest well last night? I said. Try to be normal. Lianxiu smiled. Now that Consort Zhao oversees the imperial seal, you're spared the trouble of paying respects. His Highness said you can rest today. All Eastern Palace affairs will be handled by Nanny Zheng starting tomorrow.
Yes.
Since Li Muyan's birth mother, Empress Xiaoyi, died in childbirth, the position of Empress had remained vacant. Now, the highest-ranking woman in the harem was Consort Zhao, daughter of Chancellor Zhao. Many petitioned the emperor to appoint her as Empress, but he refused. Even when she bore a prince 8 years ago, the emperor only allowed her to temporarily manage the imperial seal. The reasons? Probably only the emperor knew. I groaned. Can't I stop being a useless little dessert for a while? Lianxiu chuckled at my misfortune. Yes, Your Highness, Crown Princess. In the following days, Li Muyan became busy. Except for the day of my formal homecoming visit, I hardly saw him. At night, he stayed in his own quarters. Although my father still treated him coldly, my mother, who, like me, judged men by their faces, was charmed by him, always smiling and urging me to let her hold her future grandson. I really wanted to drag her to the Eastern Palace to see what I do every day. Under Nanny Zheng's meticulous guidance and firm discipline, I had become obedient as a little chick, diligently handling all chores. Even Nanny Zheng, still holding a grudge over my wedding mischief, gradually softened. Nanny Zheng had served Empress Xiaoyi and stayed to care for Li Muyan ever since her death. She was old now. I dared not make her angry. Lianxiu, touched and impressed, said, "I've never seen a princess so obedient and charming. You really know how to bend for His Highness." I could take no more. I threw the vermilion brush in my hand. She dodged too late. A streak of red marked her skirt. Nanny Zheng scolded softly. "Crown Princess." I had already figured out her temperament. Soft words worked better than force. So I pouted and whined. "Nanny, I'm exhausted. I've been looking at the ledgers for days. My eyes feel like they're going to go bad." Sure enough, Nanny Zheng softened. She coughed lightly. "Tomorrow I'll go out shopping. You may rest for a day, Crown Princess." My eyes lit up. "Can you bring back some peach blossom wine from Hongyan restaurant? I love that stuff." Nanny Zheng said dryly. "You're different from His Highness. You love drinking." I explained. "That's because he goes wild when he drinks too much." Nanny Zheng laughed quietly as she tidied the ledgers. "His Highness? Wild? He's always restrained. He doesn't overindulge. When he drinks, he only talks more frankly than usual. As Crown Prince, he considers that a serious fault. Only on the night of the wedding, he got carried away and drank more than usual, almost knocking himself out." I fell silent. So the honest Li Muyan was actually a rake. Lianxiu looked at me with a face that screamed, so much wasted potential. I didn't care. Once Nanny Zheng leaves tomorrow, the grand plan for my household chaos can resume. "Princess, what are you planning this time?" I smirked mischievously. The people in the Eastern Palace are all so stiff and boring. With Nanny Zheng gone, as Crown Princess, I should give everyone a bit of fun.
8.
At first, when I set up the gambling table in the courtyard, only a few young maids who took care of my meals and daily needs dared to approach. Everyone else stayed far away. I didn't know many games, so after thinking it over, I settled on a simple dice game, betting on big or small. Under my coercion and bribery, Lianxiu and a few maids played a few rounds with me. I shook the coin purse, making it jingle loudly. One maid had a streak of luck and won 3 rounds in a row, cheering excitedly. Gradually, more people gathered. Once I guaranteed, anything happens, I take full responsibility. A few little eunuchs even joined in. The usually quiet courtyard became noisy in an instant. Everyone dropped their chores and pressed around the tiny table, 3 layers deep, spilling into the small kitchen where the cooks even came over to watch. I was pleased, but I wasn't happy. After winning the first 2 rounds against Lianxiu, I lost every single round afterward. I watched as the once bulging coin purse deflated like a flattened ball, and by the end, it was empty. I weakly waved my hand. "You all play on.
I'll go scout for you."
I kicked a pebble at the palace gate, thinking I'd borrow some silver from Lianxiu later to win back what I'd lost. As the organizer, I couldn't just walk away penniless. But soon I brightened, because from afar, I saw Li Muyan returning from court. In his official robes, his posture was even more commanding, his jade crown perfectly in place, hair neatly tied, looking handsome and imposing. Perhaps spotting my excited, fidgety, cheering self, he abandoned his route to the study and walked toward me. I couldn't hide my delight and took 2 steps forward. "Your Highness, you're back. Tired? Come in for a cup of tea?" Li Muyan stared at me for a moment, then sighed. "What mischief have you gotten up to this time?" Before I could answer, a chorus of cheers and groans echoed from the courtyard, mingled with the sharp clink of coins and jewelry. Li Muyan peeked through the gate, and his expression instantly darkened. I was delighted that he was displeased. I called out again, "Your Highness! Your Highness!" Li Muyan looked at me with a black face. I traced a circle on my chest and flashed a brilliant smile. Remember your roots. Li Muyan, enraged, laughed ironically. Crown Princess, why aren't you playing too? Waiting for me on purpose? My smile stiffened. The feng shui here is all wrong. That's why I lost everything. Timing, place, and luck all matter. In a few days, I'll win it all back. No need, Li Muyan said, gripping my hand and pulling me into the courtyard. I'll win it back for you today. The crowd, seeing me, their backer, being pulled in by the Crown Prince, froze in fear, ready to kneel. I shouted, "No kneeling. I take responsibility." Betting my dignity as Princess of Danyang and Crown Princess, I held Li Muyan's hand tight, preventing him from losing his temper. "You said you'd win back my lost money, didn't you?" I asked. Li Muyan looked down at our intertwined fingers, a barely perceptible curve tugging at his mouth. With a wave of his other hand, he had his personal guard, Chu Feng, fetch some silver. Surprisingly, even though everyone trembled in fear, Li Muyan still lost every single round. I mocked from behind him. "I told you. The feng shui here is all wrong. You're even worse than me." Li Muyan was silent, hardly able to believe he hadn't won a single round. Lianxiu signaled to the crowd. Everyone nervously gathered up the coins in front of the Crown Prince and dashed off. I clapped my hands and circled in front of Li Muyan. Who would have thought it? Our all-accomplished, unbeatable Crown Prince couldn't succeed at this. Don't be sad. Everyone has a first time. Li Muyan, apparently annoyed at my smugness, grabbed my waist with both hands and sat me on the table, pinning me between him and the table. The position wasn't ideal. I pressed against his chest. "What are you doing? In broad daylight, under the open sky, don't you dare misbehave." Li Muyan leaned close, warm breath tickling my ear and flushing it red. He whispered, "I won't misbehave. Nanny Zheng would scold you if I did." I glared. "You're tattling again." Li Muyan smirked, teasingly lifted my chin, and happily walked away. The same trick couldn't be used twice, but it could be used on someone else. I dashed to the imperial study, dramatically lamenting in front of the emperor. "Father, the crown prince is negligent. He's gathering people in the Eastern Palace for gambling, and he lost everything." The emperor's face darkened. He summoned Li Muyan and scolded him harshly. Meanwhile, I sipped tea, nibbled on snacks, and played chess with myself, feeling thoroughly content. When I had eaten enough, I strained my ears to eavesdrop. I heard the emperor say, "You've completely embarrassed the imperial family and you didn't win a single game?" "Me." Li Muyan replied. "Your son is guilty, father." The emperor added, "Instead of wasting time, you should work harder and produce a grandson for me." Me. Cough, cough, cough. Li Muyan remained expressionless. "Qinghe is busy trying to win back the money. She has no time for me." Seeing the situation deteriorate, I made a hasty exit. "Father, I just remembered the silver fungus soup in the small kitchen might have burned. I have to check it before it's gone. I take my leave." Li Muyan took the brunt of the emperor's scolding, and I guessed I couldn't avoid Nanny Zheng's next lecture either. I played it smart, taking the remaining ledgers to study seriously. Nanny Zheng returned, putting 2 jars of peach blossom wine in front of me. I reached for one, but she swatted it away. "Crown Princess, finish your ledgers first before drinking." So I spent the day poring over ledgers again. I wanted to rest after dinner, but under Nanny Zheng's sharp gaze, I begrudgingly continued by lamplight. By the 13th yuan, Li Muyan arrived, reeked of alcohol. Nanny Zheng and Lianxiu exchanged a glance, ignoring my protests, snatched the ledgers and ran off with them, thoughtfully closing the door behind them. I shouted after them, "Nanny, give me back the ledgers. I could read 5 more, no, 10 more. Stay and read with me." Passing by Li Muyan, he wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder, chuckling softly. "Will you stay with me? Am I not more fun to look at than ledgers?" I was exasperated. "Why are you drinking again? You know you shouldn't." Drinking always turned him rogue. Li Muyan nuzzled my neck. These past days, affairs from the previous dynasty were urgent. The western regions are stirring, and some court officials are restless. Father was annoyed, so he made me drink more at dinner.
I asked.
When you've drunk before, what do you usually do? Li Muyan.
Sleep. I said. Good.
Then go to sleep now. I won't disturb you. Li Muyan refused to let go.
No.
Stay with me. I miss you. His words were so direct I blushed. Remembering Nanny Zheng's warning that he became more frank when drunk, I suddenly felt mischievous. I turned in his arms, facing him. Why do you miss me? Li Muyan looked a little aggrieved. I'm so busy I can't see you. I retorted. What's there to be aggrieved about? You make it sound like it's my fault. I wouldn't look for you, and you wouldn't come to me.
You don't care about me.
You're heartless. I couldn't stop laughing, a grown man throwing a little tantrum like a wife. Yet it was still Li Muyan, adorably mischievous. I stood on tiptoe and kissed his flushed, handsome face. Li Muyan retracted his sharp fingers, and I mistakenly treated him like a little spoiled puppy, forgetting that he was actually a wolf who would tear you apart. Feeling authorized, he eagerly kissed me, and before I could react, pressed me down onto the desk. Items on the desk tumbled. I cried. My peach blossom wine. Too late. One jar shattered on the floor with a crash. Li Muyan stretched out and caught the other jar. Smiling, he asked, "Want some?" His smile was radiant. I stared, dumbfounded, and nodded blankly. He uncorked the remaining jar, drank a sip, and tossed it aside, shattering it. Then he bent down, kissing me, letting the wine's fragrance linger between our lips. My mind went completely blank.
9.
After that little episode, I realized something. As long as I stirred up trouble in the Eastern Palace, Li Muyan would come running to stir up trouble with me. Since that was the case, I had no choice but to fight fire with fire. Li Muyan stared at the bowl of an indescribably burnt-colored soup in front of him, lips pressed thin, brows furrowed. I toyed with the memorial he just handed over and said earnestly, "Your Highness, this is a bowl of silver fungus soup I personally cooked for quite some time. If you don't honor it with a taste, I shall be heartbroken." Li Muyan didn't mince words. "Looking at the color of this soup, did you stew it for a whole day and night?" I clutched my chest dramatically. "No matter what, it's my sincere effort. How can your Highness mock it so?" He raised his eyes to mine. I arched an eyebrow back. We stared at each other for a long moment, until Chu Feng, who had been watching silently beside him, suddenly seemed to make up his mind. He produced a silver needle from somewhere, poised to poke the soup. I shouted,
What do you mean by that?
Chu Feng trembled. "Your Highness, this soup's color, it does look suspicious, and I'm merely taking precautions." I bared my teeth and sent him scurrying out. Li Muyan chuckled. After spooning a bit of the silver fungus soup and swallowing it with effort, he reached for my hand. "I've tasted it. Can I have the memorial back now?" I lifted it teasingly, about to haggle a little, then noticed it was about the spring hunt. My eyes lit up. I placed it respectfully on the desk before Li Muyan and obediently cleared the soup bowl, sitting beside him. Li Muyan let out the slightest, almost imperceptible sigh, and said helplessly,
Speak.
"What scheme are you planning this time?" I put on my most shameless face. "How can your Highness be so heartless, turning cold so quickly? Last night, you wanted me to spend more time with you, remember?" Li Muyan's ears turned red again. I skipped pleasantries and eagerly said, "You'll take me to the spring hunt, won't you? I haven't ridden a horse in ages. I wonder if my archery skills have deteriorated." "No." Li Muyan refused immediately. "Why not? I've been cooped up in the palace for over half a month just waiting to go play at the spring hunt." Li Muyan replied, "When I finish these matters, I will take you out of the palace to play. I don't want to wait." Li Muyan tried again. "Then, at the autumn hunt, I will take you." I straightened my expression. "Do you really think I don't know anything?" Li Muyan turned to me, his gaze deep and unreadable. I pointed at him. "You're planning to seduce young ladies from influential families while I'm away, aren't you? Then bring a few back to annoy me." Li Muyan couldn't help but laugh. You really think that of me? I rolled my eyes. I don't care. Last night you said whatever I asked you'd grant. Was that all lies? Just to trick me, coax me? Li Muyan didn't admit it. When did I ever say that? I went all in. Then tell me, last night when you said you missed me, was that true? Li Muyan didn't expect me to bring it up. Even his ears turned red, though his face remained composed. After a long pause, he said softly,
Yes.
Was what you said about liking me true?
Yes.
And the things you said while drunk, were they all true?
Yes.
Then the promise you'd grant anything I asked, was that true too? Yes, Bingo. I grinned. A gentleman's word is his bond. Looks like your highness has no choice but to take me along. Li Muyan coldly muttered 4 words. Desire clouds judgment. I might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, since my reactions are often slow, but I love to mull things over in my spare time, and afterward I can usually taste 7 or 8 parts of the truth. For example, my marriage to Li Muyan had long been in the emperor's plans. He was simply waiting for the right opportunity. My grandfather had been a distinguished general guarding the border. My father, a heroic marquis. As their only heir, marrying into the royal family was the safest choice. For another example, the emperor and my father's relationship wasn't as antagonistic as it seemed. Their constant quarrels were a cover, weaving an invisible net. After the western border unrest, the Dingyuan Marquisate could no longer remain uninvolved. Some in the court, though drawing salaries from the emperor, weren't loyal, even colluding with foreign powers. And my father had protected my mother, letting her live as a pointless, delicate dessert for years. Li Muyan clearly wanted to emulate that. In truth, he did care a little about me. That evening, I finally seized the chance to gloat and told Lianxiu. Sure, Li Muyan complimented my looks. Lianxiu's eyes widened. The Crown Prince? He doesn't seem like someone who would give compliments. What did he say? I pointed my wooden practice sword straight at her heart. She gracefully dodged, intercepting with her own sword. Princess, distracting me because you can't beat me? That won't work. I spun and moved behind her, pressing my sword handle to the back of her neck. I just want to share some marital fun with you. After all, you don't even have a crush. Lianxiu, furious, spun and flicked my wooden sword away. I couldn't defend in time, her sword now pressed against my neck. No matter. But the sword she flicked nearly struck Li Muyan, who had just entered the courtyard. Chu Feng swiftly split it in midair. Li Muyan's expression darkened, fists clenching. Xiao, run. I turned, but Xiao was gone. I bolted, only to be grabbed by Li Muyan's robe from behind, pinned in place. I forced a smile. Your Highness, what brings you here? Is there something you need? Li Muyan's face was impassive. Came to discuss marital fun with you.
10.
For some reason, Li Muyan was in a sour mood. After having someone bring the memorials into my bedchamber, he just sat there silently flipping through them. I pulled Chu Feng aside and asked what had happened. Chu Feng whispered. Today, while His Highness was out handling palace affairs, he overheard some rumors. I was completely baffled. Chu Feng quietly produced a little booklet from his robes and handed it to me. You'll understand once you read it. I glanced at the title and nearly choked. The Flirtatious Princess and the Handsome Gentleman. What kind of nonsense was this? I opened the synopsis. Sure enough, the female protagonist was obviously modeled after yours truly, the famous and utterly incompetent princess, while the male protagonist wasn't Li Muyan, it was Shen Qinghe. The synopsis went something like this. The princess and her personal bodyguard grew up together, childhood sweethearts perfectly matched. Even the princess's flower fist, embroidered leg martial arts were taught hand by the bodyguard. But the princess was too flirtatious and loved handsome men, frequently visiting Qinlu and Quguan, which left the bodyguard heartbroken. Their social status was also vastly different, so by the time they reached marrying age, the bodyguard stepped back. In a fit of anger, the princess petitioned the emperor for a marriage contract with someone else, eventually marrying another, leaving the two separated by a chasm. gazing at each other from afar. A tragic, heart-wrenching romance. I threw the booklet to the floor, furious. Utter nonsense. To me, Shen Qinghe was just my bodyguard, and nothing more. He was the orphan my grandfather had brought back from the western borders, and my grandfather had trained him in martial arts. When my grandfather retired, Qinghe stayed at the Marquis to watch over me. He had a youthful-looking face, but was 8 years older than me. My father saw that he was quiet but reliable, so he remained by my side. That was all. How dare people in the city fabricate stories about me and Qinghe, barely a week after I've left the palace? Who did this? Chu Feng said. Please calm yourself, Your Highness. His Highness has already sent someone to investigate the source. The mastermind will be found soon. I let Chu Feng leave first, then picked up the booklet and walked over to Li Muyan. Did you believe it? Li Muyan's expression remained indifferent as he continued flipping through the memorials. Qinghe, such a familiar way of addressing someone. You've never called me that intimately. My head suddenly buzzed. I said, voice low. Li Muyan, what do you mean? Li Muyan gave a self-mocking smile. Nothing. You don't need to mind it. I only regard Qinghe as a brother. Nothing else. I say this once, believe it or not. Understood. My carefully built-up anger was doused with a bucket of cold water. The fire was out, and I felt drained. Li Muyan always had the ability to make me feel like I'd punched a pillow instead of him. I spun in place, stomped my foot, and decided to just read the booklet. Setting aside everything else, the writer's prose was impressive. The story was captivating. I guess someone from the Marquis must have provided the material. Some events had actually happened, some were exaggerated, and some purely fictional. Truth and fiction were mixed, indistinguishable. During dinner, I didn't rest either, eating and reading, and asked Li Muyan across from me. Hey, Your Highness, have you finished reading this story? I find it quite amusing. His face darkened slightly. Just skim through it, I said. Well, you can read it at your leisure, a nice way to pass the time. I must say, there are some very interesting parts. Li Muyan cut me off. Shut up. I nodded. Then I'll mark the highlights for you later. It seemed Li Muyan intended to stay the night, but I didn't care. Seeing the interesting part, I grabbed some pastries and tea and went to read by the bed. Before I knew it, bedtime arrived. Li Muyan loosened his robes and came over. His shadow fell across the pages. I waved. Your Highness, move. You're blocking the light. Li Muyan snatched the booklet from my hands and tossed it aside, warning. If you read it again, I won't take you to the spring hunt. I gave up. I already knew the ending anyway. I got up, took off my outer robe, and sprawled into bed, wrapping myself in the covers. Li Muyan tried to take half of my blanket, failed, and had someone bring another one. The candle was extinguished. The bedchamber fell into dimness and silence. I closed my eyes, nearly asleep, when Li Muyan suddenly asked, how much of that booklet is true? I mumbled. 4 or 5 parts out of 10. For example, he taught me martial arts by hand, carried me to the streets as a child, made sugar figurines for me. Your relationship with him was really that close? Something like that. Li Muyan fell silent. My consciousness began to blur. He reached out and pulled me into his arms. I had no energy to think about how he had tugged the covers away. I could only let him press close and kiss my forehead. Later, I seemed to hear him murmur something else, though I couldn't tell dream from reality. Bits and pieces came through. Then what about me? You liked quarreling with me since childhood. I also made you a rabbit lantern. Enough. You've always been so heartless. 11. I had a dream about arguments and about a rabbit lantern. Li Muyan and I had never gotten along since childhood. When I was little, not to brag, but I was what you'd call a perfectly sculpted little darling, adored by anyone who saw me. Even if the emperor didn't favor my father, seeing me made him unable to resist scooping me up and pinching my chubby little cheeks. Li Muyan, on the other hand, had always worn a cold expression. Whenever I cooed and begged for treats in the emperor's arms, the crown prince would sit beside us, studying, looking utterly indifferent. I had never been treated with such coldness before. So when we were alone, I asked him, "Why are you looking at me like that? Are you jealous because the emperor favors me and not you?" Li Muyan snorted coldly. "You're good for nothing. Do you really think pouting and coquetry will get you everything you want?" He was handsome. I wanted to play with him, but hearing this made my blood boil, and I immediately got into a huge argument with him. When the emperor returned, he scolded Li Muyan, but I was still fuming. When I got home, I told my father I wanted to study. He was shocked but delighted, and immediately hired a famous tutor in the capital. But I had no interest in literary arts. All the who, and convoluted phrases made my head ache. Soon, I threw down the brush and told my father I wanted to learn martial arts instead. That was much easier. My grandfather and father had talented subordinates. I actually had more than one teacher besides Xuanan. Later I realized that martial arts alone weren't enough, so I took the military manuals from the study to read. Since my literacy was incomplete, I asked the tutor to come back and teach me. When I felt I had truly mastered my skills, I went to Li Muyan to show off. He still gave me a cold look, arrogant and self-conceited. "Is that all?" I was so angry, I smashed a bunch of his things. One of the embroidered boxes contained the phoenix head hairpin of the late empress. I didn't realize it at the time. Seeing Li Muyan's face darken, I stubbornly argued with him, then ran off. Later, I described the hairpin to my mother, and she told me the story of the late empress. I realized I was at fault and wanted to apologize to Li Muyan, but I couldn't bring myself to. At that moment, the mischievous child from the Su family ran into me. Su Ziqian had always disliked Li Muyan for two reasons. His father, the grand tutor, constantly praised Li Muyan in front of him, and he seemed to like Zhao Mingrua. Enraged, Su Ziqian started rambling wildly in the palace, claiming that Li Muyan had cursed his mother, causing the late empress's health to decline after conceiving him, and eventually leading to her death in childbirth. Seeing his ignorant, foolish face, I flew into a rage, pinned him to the ground, and gave him a proper beating, yelling, "I told you not to talk nonsense. Cursed his mother? You'll see what happens if you say another word." The palace attendants couldn't stop me. Only Li Muyan came and pulled me off, scolding me for being crude and unruly as a woman. I was stunned, pushed him away, and stormed off, declaring I never wanted to see him again. After that, I stopped following my father to the palace. The next time I saw Li Muyan was the Lantern Festival of the following year. I went out with Lianxiu and Xuanan to view the lanterns, and there he was, on a leisure outing from the palace. He wore dark robes and a fox fur coat, his posture already tall and elegant. Under the lantern light, his features looked picturesque, standing out in the crowd. But I walked straight past him without a word, and he didn't speak either. He simply followed at a distance. I spotted a rabbit-shaped lantern and tried to solve riddles with Lianxiu and Xuanan, but we were too inexperienced. Others won the lantern, and as I browsed many stalls afterward, there were no more rabbit lanterns to be found. Seeing the hour grow late, I returned home disappointed. As I was getting ready for bed, my mother wrapped me in a large cloak, saying Li Muyan had come to the Marquis to see me. Bewildered, I went to the front hall. Li Muyan handed me a strange rabbit lantern. I wrapped myself tighter in the cloak, took it, and glanced at it.
Ugly.
"Where did you find this?" Li Muyan, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. We exchanged a few barbed remarks, then he left in a bad mood. Exhausted, I gave the lantern to my mother and went to sleep. Later, having gained the upper hand, I occasionally ran back to the palace to continue my antics.
12.
This spring hunt brought together many high officials and their families. Looking at the bustling camp, I, who had been cooped up for days, was practically bouncing with excitement. I even dug out my long and used riding outfit, tying my hair into a ponytail with a ribbon. Spotting my father and mother from afar, I wrenched my hand free from Li Muyan's grip and ran toward them gleefully. Xuanan was there too, looking a bit haggard. I chatted with my parents for a while, then couldn't help asking him what was wrong. Xuanan said, "If the princess hears certain rumors, Please do not take them to heart. I laughed. Xuanan, don't you know me yet? He gave me a faint smile. I went on. Did father take back your money and give you all the dirty work? You look even thinner than before. My father tapped my head. What are you saying? Is your father that kind of person? I said. How would I know? After all, Xuanan and I split your secret stash and betrayed you. Maybe you're getting revenge while I'm not looking. My father opened his mouth to say more, but Li Muyan walked over and took my hand. After formal greetings, he suddenly stuffed a cherry from his pouch into my mouth. Bewildered, I still ate it under his threatening gaze. Ugh, this cherry is so sour. I spat out the pit, unable to help complaining. Li Muyan's face remained impassive. Yes, very sour. My mother laughed brightly, and even my father's usually stern expression threatened to crack. I turned to Li Muyan. Are you being childish or what? Li Muyan said nothing. My mother intervened. All right. Prince, you'd better go back with our little girl. The hunt is about to begin. The opening of the spring hunt was fairly ordinary, no different from previous years. The emperor appeared briefly, claimed he felt unwell, and returned to the dragon tent, leaving the crown prince in charge. It was rare, however, to see the usually reclusive consort Zhao, though the little prince did not attend. Li Muyan wore fitted hunting gear, riding a purebred horse, his face handsome, shoulders broad, waist narrow, posture elegant. He drew a lot of attention. I saw several unmarried ladies blushing in the crowd, which made me shove more cherries into my mouth in annoyance. Li Muyan glanced back at me, a hint of amusement in his black eyes. What do you want? I can hunt one for you. No, I said, my mouth still holding the cherry pit. I looked away. I want to hunt it myself. His smile grew wider. At the sound of the horn, he led a group out. I called Lianxiu over to help me pick a horse. She looked worried. Princess, maybe you shouldn't. Don't worry, Xiu'er. It's only the first day. Nothing will happen. Just let me have my fun today. Reluctantly, she mounted a horse and followed. As fate would have it, not long after I entered the hunting grounds, I ran into Su Ziqian. The mischievous brat had grown into a refined-looking young man. He stiffened at the sight of me. You're here too? Shouldn't you stay at the camp? What are you doing here? I lifted my bow, notching no arrow, and made a feint. Obviously, I'm here to hunt.
Can't you see?
He glanced behind me. You didn't bring enough people. What if danger comes? I frowned. Did you get smacked silly by me? Why are you worrying about me now? Look at your tiny frame. Better worry about yourself. Su Ziqian glared but insisted on accompanying me, claiming he'd brought a few guards in case of trouble. I said, You're much more sensible than before. He looked annoyed, glared again, seemed about to speak, then held his tongue. Not far off, a wild rabbit darted from the grass. I stopped wasting words, drew an arrow from my back, and shot. It hit instantly.
See?
Isn't your big sister Danyang amazing? I said proudly. Su Ziqian scoffed. It's just a rabbit. What's there to boast about? I warned him. Don't say I didn't warn you. If you follow me, you might come back empty-handed. You just try it.
Try it I did.
From then on, I didn't leave a single bird for him. As the sun dipped toward the western hills, his face grew less than happy. I thought he's only 2 years younger, trying to do good by me. I can't let him lose face. Just then, a spotted deer startled by the commotion bolted from behind a tree. I said, For your concern, I'll hunt this deer for you. I spurred my horse to chase it. The deer was fast, but not faster than my steed. Soon I took aim and fired 2 arrows in quick succession, striking its abdomen. It collapsed instantly. Feeling triumphant, I began heading back, but halfway there, my heart nearly stopped. I saw Li Muyan lifting Zhao Mingrua onto a horse. Lifting her onto a horse. 14. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I hadn't imagined it. Rage surged through me, smoke practically coming out of my ears, and without thinking, I charged straight toward him. I reined in my horse and glared down at Li Muyan. My face must have looked absolutely furious. Li Muyan froze for a moment, seemingly forgetting to explain. My anger only grew. I jumped off my horse, intending to pull Zhao Mingrua down myself. Li Muyan blocked me. I nearly injured her earlier. She twisted her ankle because of it. I pointed at the group standing nearby, fuming. Didn't she bring guards with her? Why did you have to carry her? Are you trying to take a secondary consort? Li Muyan was momentarily stunned, then seemed both exasperated and amused. He whispered, "She cries whenever anyone touches her. I couldn't just leave her here, could I?" Zhao Mingrua's eyes were still wet with tears, her voice trembling. "Crown Princess, please don't misunderstand. I had important matters to discuss with the Crown Prince, which is why I came here recklessly and almost ended up in harm's way." I kept a cold expression. "Is that all? If you're done, go back on your own. Or, do you expect my husband to hold your horse too?" She neither answered nor moved. I rolled my eyes just as Suzy Qian arrived. I handed him the spotted deer I had hunted, sending him to escort Zhao Mingrua back. Today I would do a good deed, regardless of Suzy Qian's awkward expression or Zhao Mingrua's resentful one. I forcibly sent them off. Li Muyan watched silently, hands behind his back. Lianxia wisely stepped back with the guards, giving us some space. I didn't want to deal with him, swung back onto my horse, and prepared to leave. Seeing this, Li Muyan abandoned his prize horse, blocked my path, and insisted on riding the same horse with me, even reaching for my hand to pull him up. I refused, so he tried to lead my horse instead. As dusk fell, I didn't want to argue, so I gave in. Triumphant, he reached around my waist, took the reins from my hand, and pulled me into his arms. "Really silly," he whispered in my ear. I elbowed him hard. He grunted. "You know, Suzy Qian doesn't like Zhao Mingrua. He did like her. When we were kids, he secretly hid a white jade hairpin. I found it and he blushed, saying it was for Zhao Mingrua. Then why did he deliberately speak ill of me while you were around? You don't think he'd say such things openly, do you?" I froze. No wonder he always looked at me with that hesitant expression. So, I not only beat him up but also hurt his feelings? That's harsh. Li Muyan laughed. "No matter, he always thought you liked me anyway." I pouted. "I don't like you." "Yes," Li Muyan sighed softly. "But I like you." His lips were so close to my ear. Each word, lightly breathed, struck my heart like a hammer. My pulse raced. I tensed, unsure how to respond, feeling my face, ears, and neck flush. Then I like you too." Li Muyan didn't expect that answer. He paused mid-grip on the reins, then chuckled quietly, hugging me tighter and leaning in to kiss my reddening cheek. "Say, husband, once more, and let's see." I turned my head. "How come you can be mischievous even without drinking?" We were approaching the campfire-lit area. The night had a strangely quiet, almost eerie calm. Li Muyan grew serious. "Don't run off tomorrow. There's likely to be a hard battle soon." "That's what Zhao Mingrua told you, isn't it?" I sighed. "Chancellor Zhao is old and confused. I saw Consort Zhao. She has no real intention to intervene. Only some of the Western Xia states are pretending to support him, but he can't see the situation clearly." Li Muyan smiled lightly. "You're quite knowledgeable." "Of course. I was born into a military family. A woman should be no less than a man." Li Muyan pressed a gentle kiss on my face. "Take care of yourself, Qinghe." The events unfolded faster than expected. Zhao Qian must have learned that Zhao Mingrua, acting on Consort Zhao's orders, sought out Li Muyan. Fearing delays, he mobilized troops the next night and surrounded the dragon tent. He thought capturing the emperor first would solve everything. His grandson, the second Prince Li Muyan, only had to wait for the abdication decree. But when he entered, he found not the emperor, but the emperor's half-brother, Prince Anxian, who normally stayed in his own fief. The real emperor had returned to the palace right after the spring hunt began. Sensing trouble, Zhao Qian's followers fought their way out. Rebel forces coordinated with Western Xia to cover their retreat. My father and Li Muyan led the counterattack, They fled toward the western Xia stronghold. After the Western Frontier Rebellion, my father and grandfather had noticed anomalies. How could a coalition of small Western Xia states hold out against the Imperial Army for 3 years? There must have been internal infiltration, attacked from both front and back. I sat in the tent, pondering. Surely more than one Zhao chancellor was involved. Western Xia's ambitions couldn't rest on a single pawn. Figuring out how to sever their roots would not be easy. Outside, the sounds gradually subsided. Dawn was breaking. Xuanan entered. I asked, "Where's Lianxiu?" Suddenly, several poisoned arrows shot into the tent from behind. I couldn't dodge in time. One grazed my arm. Xuanan rushed to protect me. I felt dizzy from poison, then a heavy strike at my neck, and everything went black. When I woke, I was still in the tent, though its decorations suggested Western Xia influence. I must have been unconscious for quite some time. A few people entered. The leader, dressed lavishly, smiled coldly. "The Crown Princess of Central Plains, truly beautiful," I replied. "Your Central Plains speech is quite good, Third Prince." Satoru laughed heartily. "I've long heard the Danyang house's daughter is no ordinary woman. Truly remarkable. Flattery aside, you've all been sticking your hands into the Danyang house. Even as a waste, I can't be too careless," I said, raising my voice. "Right, Shen Qinghe?" Xuanan walked in silently. Satoru asked, "You even know who he is?" I shrugged, unable to move my bound hands, and lifted my chin. "He's the orphan brought from the Western Frontier. Of course, I need to verify his identity before keeping him close. Do you think we're fools?" Satoru's eyes flashed with killing intent. He rested a hand on his waist sword. "If you already knew, why keep him? Know yourself, know your enemy. 100 battles without danger," I replied. "Then it seems he cannot be kept." "Wait," I interrupted. "Why did you capture me? You're the only daughter of the Danyang Marquis and Crown Princess. Capturing you benefits our war effort without harm." I stared at the tent ceiling, unimpressed. "What did Zhao Qian promise you?" If Zhao Qian had succeeded, over 10 cities would have gone to Western Xia, along with other rewards. "Since he failed, he can become my strategist," Satoru said, tugging at my ropes. "And you, given your status, even without this war, trading you could gain several cities. From the Western Xia king to you. The deals with Zhao Qian spanned over 20 years, yet none were honored. And you still believed him? Ridiculous. No great loss, right?" Satoru straightened. "As you said, know yourself, know your enemy. Large plans must be executed carefully." "Enough. I don't want to waste words." I settled into a comfortable position. "Since you keep me for a purpose, provide food now. Keep Shen Qinghe to look after me. The rest I'm not used to. If the third prince is worried, send someone to watch. His beauty behind you will do fine. I like her." The matter was urgent. Satoru's men complied without further discussion. I had Xuanan loosen my ropes, hands only tied, and turned to the beauty. "I've seen you before at Minghua Tower. That beauty mark at your eye, exquisite." The beauty smiled, almost dazzling me. "You caught me disguised as a man. How embarrassing. Do you obey Li Muyan?" I asked. "Qiangu can also obey you," she said, glancing at Xuanan. "Even the 5th prince obeys you." Xuanan frowned slightly, clearly displeased with the title. I explained, "He just wants to take his mother and sister away, free from Western Xia's coercion." Qiangu said, "Not difficult. To bring you here, the 3rd prince has already brought Madame Sun and the princess to the stronghold as the exchange." Indeed, Xuanan was not an orphan. He was the son of the Western Xia king. His mother was a low-born Central Plains slave. Beautiful, she bore him and a sister, but was not favored. Satoru's maternal clan was powerful. He had ambition, skill, and means. Seeing Xuanan resembled a Central Plains person, he used the mother and infant sister as leverage, tossing the young Xuanan to my grandfather as a spy. Unfortunately, Satoru was overconfident, ignoring the hearts of others. Much had already slipped from his control, yet he still assumed victory was certain. I asked Qiangwu. How many men are here? He chuckled. You overestimate me. Only dozens. Enough, I said, retrieving a red jade pendant from my robe. With my father's men, small tasks are easy. Qiangwu accepted it silently. I added, courtesy is reciprocal. This tactic isn't unique to Western Xia. 14. The Western Xia king had grown old and lost real power, while Saturo was overly aggressive. On the surface, Western Xia seemed increasingly strong, but in reality it was weak at its core, burdened by his endless campaigns to expand territory. In less than half a month, the Western Xia main army suffered successive defeats. Their supply lines were burned, Zhao Qian was killed, and soon Saturo resorted to playing his trump card, me. Saturo personally had me placed atop the watchtower. Looking down at the dense, imposing army below, I didn't feel very afraid. At the forefront were my father and Li Muyan. I couldn't help noticing how good Li Muyan looked in armor. I kept sneaking glances until a cold, gleaming sword was suddenly pressed against my neck. Saturo said, I truly underestimated you. Tell your father and your husband to withdraw the army and yield 5 cities, or your head falls now. I wanted to give him a look that said, are you out of your mind? But he stood behind me, and I couldn't move. So, I exaggerated my expression and shouted down to the troops below the watchtower. Father, did you see the words on my face? Silence fell. My father and Li Muyan watched me in silence. Even Saturo had no idea what I was doing. I pointed to myself and shouted, loyalty and courage, sacrifice for the nation. Taking advantage of Saturo's momentary distraction, I lunged forward, snatching his sword and aiming it at his neck. But he was a battle-hardened warrior, and his reflexes were sharp. My strike missed, leaving only a slash of blood across his neck. The troops on the watchtower clashed violently. Saturo, furious, ignored everything else and raised a bow to shoot at me. The platform was narrow. I had nowhere to hide. I threw my sword at him and leapt off the tower. I braced myself to protect my head, only to see my father and Li Muyan rushing toward me. Li Muyan had already guessed my intention, arriving a step before my father, and caught me midair from his horse. The startled horse reared, throwing us both. Li Muyan held me tightly, shielding my head as we tumbled dozens of feet before coming to a stop. My whole body ached as if it had fallen apart, but luckily I wasn't injured beyond mobility. My arms and legs still worked. I pushed against him softly, whispering, I'm fine. Li Muyan, still catching his breath, replied, I'm not. My father quickly sent us back to camp. Li Muyan's back had slammed into the ground from the horse's throw, injuring him badly. Once back, he passed out. I later heard that our troops, already high in morale, were further invigorated by the Crown Princess's daring feat. The Western Xia main army was annihilated, Saturo's head was taken, and the army pressed all the way to the Western Xia King's stronghold. With no choice, the Western Xia King handed over the list of agents embedded in our court to end the campaign. Aside from Zhao Qian, the others were potential threats but not major players. Following the emperor's instructions, do not pursue a fleeing enemy, our army withdrew, returning in triumph. When Li Muyan awoke, he only scolded me once in anger. Foolish. After that, he ignored me completely. I whispered soft reassurances. You know my experience, I wouldn't have fallen to my death. No, it's because I trusted you. You would catch me, that's why I dared. Even though part of the reason I was captured was for Xuanan, our men in the Western Xia army allowed me to coordinate with you for a swift victory. See how I stirred up the Western Xia encampment? Isn't that impressive? Please don't be mad. I won't act up again. Does your wound still hurt? Is the medicine bitter? Shall I bring some preserved fruit for you? Li Muyan remained genuinely angry. He didn't speak to me until his injuries were mostly healed. Frustrated, I returned to my mother's house. My father told me that when Li Muyan saw me with a sword at my neck atop the watchtower, his face had gone pale, his fists clenched audibly, and his body trembled uncontrollably. He sighed, admitting that he had reluctantly approved of this son-in-law. My mother said that in a marriage, couples may quarrel by the bedside but reconcile by the foot of the bed. Then she kicked me out of the house, forbidding me to spend the night there. When I returned to the Eastern Palace, Li Muyan sat in my chamber with a cold expression. He endured silently before finally saying, "After a few days of coaxing me, you've lost patience?" Seeing this, Lianxiu sent the palace servants out, gave me a knowing glance, and thoughtfully closed the door. I shamelessly stepped forward and kissed the corner of his mouth, softening my voice. "I truly admit my mistake." Li Muyan's features softened immediately. I pressed my advantage, wrapping my arms around his waist. "I love you the most." Li Muyan glanced at me. "Really?" I quickly raised my hand in assurance. "Really? I only like you, love you the most, and want to be with you forever." Finally, a smile appeared on Li Muyan's face. He bent down and kissed me gently. "I love you, Li Muyan Extra." I was made Crown Prince the moment I was born. From a young age, I knew my mother hadn't died simply from childbirth complications. Zhao Qian had used Zhao Guifei to poison her. My father knew too, but in the inner court of the previous dynasty, pulling one thread could unravel the whole. He couldn't act against the Zhao family directly. All he could do was compensate me by granting the position of heir. I also knew early on that Dingyuan Marquis' daughter would become my future crown princess. My father trusted the Marquis, a trust whose origin is hard to explain, especially since the Marquis had once stolen the woman my father loved. But I later realized, whenever the Marquis visited my father in the study, aside from discussing matters of state that he could not avoid, he only boasted about his wife and daughter. My father remarked, "The Marquis, Shen Qinghe, has only those pursuits." It seemed the Marquis didn't intend to give his cherished daughter to me. My father hadn't been able to protect my gentle mother. Could I protect the pampered little Marquis daughter? The first time Shen Qinghe entered the palace, she was already irresistibly adorable, a little pink bundle that made everyone smile. She knew it too, often acting coquettishly to get what she wanted. Even my father couldn't resist holding her. Though my father doted on me, he never indulged me the way he did her. As crown prince, I was heir to the throne. What I needed was not parental affection, but the cold majesty of a sovereign. After my father left, Shen Qinghe bounced up to me, her childish voice asking if I was feeling jealous. Seeing her, I suddenly thought of my mother, who had been poisoned, and I said to her coldly, "You're good for nothing, achieving nothing on your own. You only know how to use your charm to get what you want. If all you know is this, how will you survive in this treacherous palace?" Even as the words left my mouth, I knew I had gone too far. She was still a little girl. This was her time to be spoiled. The palace walls were suffocating, and this little burst of life was rare. She flushed with anger, like a dumpling thrown into hot oil, hopping and shouting as she argued with me. I was 2.5 years older, so I argued back. When my father returned, he scolded me. Later, the Marquis asked what I had fed his daughter, some sort of potion to twist her mind, because after returning home, Shen Qinghe forced herself to study with her tutor, scowling like a little steamed bun, yet trying to maintain composure. I was puzzled. I expected her to complain to her father and have him scold me too. For a while, I didn't see her. I heard she had taken up martial arts again, crawling, tumbling, and covering herself in bruises, so strong-willed. The Marquis laughed to my father, saying the girl still loved reading military strategy, but when she realized she couldn't understand the text, she pitifully went back and fetched her tutor. I imagined her little scrunched-up face and couldn't help smiling, which made the Marquis glare at me, scolding, "It's all your fault. And you even dare to smile?" Indeed, it was my fault. Shen Qinghe, who used to bring laughter and joy, hadn't appeared in so long enough that I could only see her at distant court banquets, long enough that when she finally came before me again, she had grown into a graceful young lady. Perhaps feeling accomplished, Shen Qinghe proudly came to see me alone, bruises still visible on the backs of her hands. I wanted to compliment her, but the words that came out were, "Arrogant fool, that's all there is to it." Disappointment flashed in her clear eyes, quickly replaced by anger. She smashed several things at me, including a phoenix-headed hairpin that had belonged to my mother. Seeing my face, she still stubbornly argued before leaving. After that, she never held a grudge. Whenever she saw me, she wanted to speak, but hesitated, then shied away. One day, while discussing state affairs with a grand tutor, a palace servant reported that Shen Qinghe had beaten up the young master Su Ziqian from the grand tutor's family. The servant told me alone. The grand tutor didn't hear. I used an excuse to keep the grand tutor at the Eastern Palace and went to the Imperial Garden myself. On the way, the reporting servant explained the incident. When I arrived, I saw Shen Qinghe pinning Su Ziqian down, hitting and scolding him. She had done it for me, which gave me a strange sense of happiness. But she was too close to him. Didn't she know propriety? I stepped forward and pulled her away, telling her she shouldn't be so rude. She looked at me in shock, then shoved me hard, saying she never wanted to see me again. I stood there for the first time feeling genuinely unsure. Su Ziqian was helped to his feet, staring blankly at the direction she had left, seemingly unaffected by the impudent things he had said. I suddenly realized Su Ziqian liked her. I couldn't say how I felt. I always knew she would be my wife. Nothing else mattered. I kept the incident to myself. Su Ziqian never said another word. But Shen Qinghe didn't return to the palace. She refused her favorite imperial kitchen pastries and even avoided court banquets. On the Lantern Festival, which was the Marquis wife's birthday, she would go to the streets to see the lanterns after the evening banquet. I waited along her usual path. She saw me, but walked right past without greeting. I had no choice but to follow at a distance, hoping she might acknowledge me. She chose a rabbit-shaped lantern but couldn't solve the riddle with her two attendants. She glanced back at me briefly, then quickly turned away. Someone else won the lantern. Shen Qinghe was disappointed. She looked for rabbit-shaped lanterns along the street but found none and returned home. I ran back to the previous stall as the owner was packing up. I gave him a gold ingot and asked him to teach me how to make a rabbit lantern. In a rush, I made one and ran to the Marquis residence. Shen Qinghe, still drowsy, had been dragged out of bed by the Marchioness, looking unhappy. I handed her the lantern. She examined it and said, "Ugly. Where did you find this?" I was offended and argued with her for a bit, frowning and leaving. I've always been good at restraining my emotions, but Shen Qinghe had always known how to push my buttons. Later, she resumed coming to the palace with the Marquis. She claimed she had heard the Imperial Kitchen developed a new pastry flavor and insisted on trying it. After court, I often stayed in the study, listening to my father spar with the Marquis. Shen Qinghe would come in with pastries from the Imperial Kitchen, saying she was bored and asking if I wanted to play chess. Her chess skills were poor, and she often cheated. I scolded her a bit, and she argued back. One day she moved a piece when I wasn't looking. I teased her, and she became embarrassed and furious, pointing at me and threatening to marry into the Eastern Palace, just to torment me. I froze, staring at her in disbelief. She thought she had bested me, proudly making threats. Little did she know I was thinking, could it really be this lucky? My father hadn't expected that he wouldn't even need to speak. The marriage decree practically fell into my lap. When Shen Qinghe knelt, her legs trembling, I couldn't help but smile. The Marquis saw me and glared, scolding me again. Zhao Mingrua came to me, professing her affection and requesting to be my concubine. I refused. She cried, saying she would even accept being a secondary wife, as long as she could stay by my side. Zhao Qian and Zhao Guifei's schemes over the years, she didn't know. I was thinking of how to reject her when I caught a sneaky glimpse of Shen Qinghe. I walked toward her, but she insisted that Zhao Mingrua and I were ill-fated lovers. I was annoyed, and of course, Zhao Mingrua provoked her. Shen Qinghe, always at odds with her, grabbed my arm and started saying all sorts of saccharine things. Ever since I had scolded her in childhood, she had never coquetted with me again. Now, this affectation felt strange to me. In reality, Shen Qinghe had always been carefree and didn't care much about petty grievances. Zhao Mingrua's maid had taken advantage of this to manipulate her in front of me. I scolded, "How dare you?" And Shen Qinghe was startled. I found it amusing and pulled her to my side, speaking on her behalf. Shen Qinghe's little act of bravado was utterly adorable. After she sent Zhao Mingruo away in a huff, she was still grinning with pride. I teased her a bit, and the man beside her smoothed her hair for her. That man, Qiangu, had told me his identity, and I had mentioned it to the Dingyuan Marquis. Later I realized it was all part of a double scheme. Still, I couldn't accept him. The way he looked at Shen Qinghe wasn't the way a mere guard should look, and certainly not the way her brother, as she later called him, ought to. My father and I sensed that Zhao Qian and Xiwang were about to make a move. I had Qiangu come to the capital to meet me, and to avoid suspicion, he disguised himself as a woman and mingled at Mingyue Tower. By unlucky coincidence, I ran into Shen Qinghe. I didn't know how to explain the situation, but she gave me a graceful way out. Qiangu later said that when the little princess saw him as the door was closing, she wasn't very happy. After discussing matters with him, I went to find Shen Qinghe. She was drunk, mistaking me for a male courtesan from Mingyue Tower, and took liberties with me, igniting chaos everywhere. She was completely unguarded around men. I debated whether to teach her a lesson, but she leaned over and fell asleep on me. I had no choice but to settle her comfortably. The next day, I brought her before my father and, in concert with him, advanced the date of our marriage. On the night of the wedding, I was overjoyed. Anyone who toasted me got me drunk. I knew they had received the Marquis instructions and were deliberately filling my cup. Shen Qinghe caused a commotion in the Eastern Palace, so I had no choice but to leave early, watching her in her red dress, radiant and defiant, standing on the roof. She pretended to be fierce, telling me I'd never have a good day again, which, of course, meant she would always be by my side. I said to her, "Shen Qinghe, come down. I'll catch you." She blushed but lunged at me without hesitation. Dizzy, I lost my balance and fell with her. Emboldened by the alcohol, I teased her like a mischievous rogue, making her blush even more. Following my impulse, I pressed her against the table, continuing my playful seduction. She finally gave in. After sobering up, I sat outside, unsure how to face her. Shen Qinghe scolded me, so I guiltily poured her water, letting her vent, while teasing her just a little. She even had a nosebleed, and I couldn't help laughing, but she chased me out. After that, apart from her visits back home, I was busy with matters related to Xiwang. Reports from spies indicated that Zhao Qian was likely to make his move around the spring hunt. Shen Qinghe, having been calm for a while, grew mischievous again in Zheng Nanny's absence, even daring to hold a gambling game in the Eastern Palace and preemptively accusing others. My father, concerned with state affairs, let her make her fuss. During dinner, he had me drink a lot, saying he missed my mother. I staggered over to Shen Qinghe, and seeing her like a frightened little deer, I laughed and pulled her into my arms. Shen Qinghe coveted my beauty, and I could see it. When I teased her, she couldn't resist giving me a kiss. I took advantage of it, pressing her to a desk to continue teasing her, and she eventually surrendered. The next day, she felt guilty and forced me to drink an almost inedible soup, insisting I take her to the spring hunt. I wanted to keep her away from all the conflicts. My handling of them was enough. But Shen Qinghe wasn't an ordinary girl. She could always handle matters herself. While carrying out palace duties, someone deliberately spread rumors about her and Shen Sunan to me. I knew her character, but I couldn't help my jealousy. My heart twisted. Shunang, Shunang. I loved it when Shen Qinghe called me by my full name, but when she called me Shen Sunan, it felt more intimate, and that made me upset. Too childish, really, not befitting a crown prince. I chuckled at myself, which angered Shen Qinghe. She thought I didn't trust her. Fuming, she waved her book in front of me, deliberately provoking me by claiming the story was excellent. I knew I'd feel hurt, but I couldn't resist asking her which parts were true, and she honestly told me. So bitter. On the first day of the spring hunt, I plucked a sour cherry and put it in her mouth, telling her how I felt. She said I was childish. Zhao Guifei had no intention of rebelling. When she harmed my mother, It had been Zhao Qian acting without her knowledge, using her hands, and forcing her to bear the emperor's child. She once admired my father, but he would never forgive her. Now, she only wanted to protect her child. She pretended to agree with Zhao Qian, giving cover for my father's return to the palace. She told Zhao Mingrua everything, prompting her to consult me. My arrow nearly hit Zhao Mingrua as she rushed to me distraught. She revealed the entirety of what Zhao Guifei knew. She twisted her ankle. I wanted to have guards escort her back, but she cried and struggled. I had no choice but to carry her onto the horse myself. Shen Qinghe saw this and charged over, her beautiful face dark with fury. Before I could react, she tried to pull Zhao Mingrua off the horse. I stopped her and tried to explain. She angrily demanded whether I intended to take a concubine. Rarely did she act so irrationally. When she uttered, "My husband," out of jealousy, I suddenly realized Shen Sunan was nothing extraordinary. She handed Zhao Mingrua over to Suzy Qian, and I couldn't help but feel delighted.
She thought she was helping me achieve something.
I instructed her to protect herself, because I might be too busy to look after her. She agreed without hesitation, and immediately after, was taken to Shiwang's garrison. I longed to rush there alone and kill them all. The Dingyuan Marquis stopped me, assuring me not to worry. I had to trust Shen Qinghe this time, for the greater good. And she truly was unstoppable. She burned the Shiwang garrison's grain supplies, assassinated Zhao Qian, rescued Sunan's mother and sister, and finally, she herself was taken to the watchtower. I watched the sword pressed against her neck, feeling as if my heart had been gripped and my breath stolen. She remained nonchalant, claiming she would die for the country. I realized her intent and charged forward. She leapt from the tower as boldly as on our wedding night.
How dare she?
I held her in my arms, not daring to relax for even a second. She said she was fine, and I breathed a tentative sigh, my mind still blurry. Upon waking, I scolded her, and she cooed and flattered me to make me happy. I secretly enjoyed it, so I deliberately ignored her, making her come to cheer me every day. When my wounds healed, she returned to the Marquis residence. I was planning how to lure her back when she ran back to me herself. I feigned a cold expression, asking if she had no patience, and she ran up and kissed me. I couldn't keep my composure. The palace was lonely and silent. Shen Qinghe, you shall torment me like this forever.